On Nightlive, we take a look at edible oils industry in Zambia. Edible oils are most often plant-based oils, which are similar, if not the same, as produced by the industrial biotech industry for use as biofuels such as biodiesel. It is also used in cosmetics and in other everyday biotech products. Now, these edible oils may also, be solid or liquid at room temperature. Zambia has an oilseed crushing capacity of over 700,000 tons. In a few good seasons, Zambia may become self-sufficient on edible oils. This is what we're discussing tonight, and we're trying to look at the capacity that Zambia has to promote the growth of this industry. Join me shortly after this break as I introduce my guest for tonight. I'm Francesca Phiri-Banda, and tonight on Nightlive, I'm joined by the Zambia Association of Manufacturers Chief Executive Officer, CHIPEGO, ZULU. Now, CHIPEGO, have we as a country seen much value addition in our oilseeds and the edible oils industry?
Well, generally, we do have a number of players that have made heavy investments into crushing capacity and really creating an edible oils market in Zambia. I think we take cognizance that when we go into any supermarket, for instance, a lot of the cooking oil that we're purchasing is actually made in Zambia, product of Zambia, from Zambian produce such as soya beans and even cottonseed in some instances. So the industry has been growing. However, there is a lot more that can be done to ensure that we are strengthening the growth of the sector, both in agriculture, from soya beans, cottonseed, and all of these other seeds that we use to add value and create cooking oil and soaps, and beyond that point, to ensure that the agricultural sector is growing, the manufacturing sector is growing, and the Zambian economy is growing.
So now how can, this industry create value addition on oil products, example, for regional growth, especially in the agro-processing sector?
Okay, so when we're looking at agro-processing, just like I've said, when we're adding value as manufacturers, especially in edible oils, what we're doing is actually providing or creating a market for our farmers. And for the most part, majority of the farmers we're sourcing from are small-scale farmers. And in agriculture, we have our soya beans, we have our cottonseed, and when we're adding value, we create a demand for that market. And so we create a ready market for our small-scale farmers. In the past, we did see an increase in the uptake of soya beans from edible oils producers, but after some certain policy changes and even an increase in the level of imported finished edible oils, the competition that arose from that actually eroded some of the gains that had been created. So all that employment we were envisaging from the growth of the edible oil sector has actually now been negated to an extent. So there is need for intervention and very actively to ensure that we're supporting our small-scale farmers, to ensure that we're creating employment, creating jobs.
Speaking of which, have our own brands or companies producing these edible oils invested much in research and, development on the growth of oil products in the country?
Definitely. I think you'll note if you go to any of our well-established edible oil manufacturers, there is an extensive amount of work that goes into the production of these products, ensuring that they're high quality, ensuring that they're able to be consumed in a healthy manner by the Zambian consumers. And I think you'll note even in global reports, such as by the World Food Program, that they're talking about edible oils as an essential sort of commodity for our health as human beings. And ultimately, we look at it as a key area for intervention to make it accessible, more accessible to Zambian consumers at more competitive prices.
All right. And in terms of addressing some of the pitfalls, affecting this growth of the edible oil industry, such as policy impediments not being fully effected, the cost of doing business, as well as smuggling of products in the country amidst many other challenges. How are we going to address some of these pitfalls?
So, let's start with the cost of doing business. I think more recently, even just last week, there was a new statutory instrument that was signed, specifically talking about minimum wages. Now, it's implementable, enforceable as of Monday, the 10th of September. Now, you can imagine the instrument has been signed. This is September. Budgets, there's no room for adjustment for industry. And effectively, what this does is increase exponentially the cost structure for manufacturers manufacturers and ultimately for all productive sectors. And when we're talking about economic growth and national development and creating employment, actually what we've done with the minimum wage is create a situation where we expect to see an increase in the cost of products ultimately, because we have to cater for this rapid increase in costs, and so we will expect to see an increase in the cost of product, making them more uncompetitive in terms of price as compared to imported products. And ultimately what that will do, make it more expensive even for the domestic workers, for instance, that we were raising the wages for, to access the commodity. And ultimately, as business, you know, we do have to ensure that our margins remain within a certain rate. And as a result of that, what we can expect to see in a couple of months is actually loss of employment on the market. And this is, I don't believe this is the aspiration that we have as industry. It's not the aspiration that we have when we're talking about job creation and ensuring that Zambia is able to develop and become a prosperous middle-income country. So cost of doing business is really affecting the growth of industry, affecting the growth of the edible oils industry. And it stems, it's a lot of different things. Now it's the cost of labor, but previously we were talking about a number of key areas, such as the cost of inputs, raw materials. You know, Zambia is land-linked, landlocked, depending on how you look at it. But when you talk about value addition, we do import quite a number of our inputs. And currently, some of those are being charged as high, imagine a raw material being charged as high as 15%. I'll talk specifically about palm ceratine, for example, is charged 15% and is a key input when we're manufacturing soaps, for instance. And finished products, you can imagine we're importing from various regions. So finished products are coming in duty-free if they're from SADC and COMESA. So we are automatically creating a scenario where we're making it expensive for our manufacturers in the edible oils industry. Soap is a byproduct of this whole process, so we're making it expensive for our manufacturers in the edible oils industry to actually produce a product that can compete favorably in terms of price with imported like products.
All right, so now you've spoken extensively on, you know, addressing some of the pitfalls. But when we talk about opportunities, do we see any opportunities in this oil-rich production sector?
Yes, I mean, definitely this is what we're talking about here. We have seen earlier this year, our Minister of Commerce, Honorable Yaluma, launched the industrial policy and is talking about accelerated industrialization. And if you look at the edible oil sector and the studies done even by Indaba Agricultural Policy Research Institute, what you'll see is that the sector creates the opportunity for rapid growth in terms of employment. And employment is what we need. We need more people to get into the formal workspace because this translates into increased tax revenue. It allows us to then plow that back into investments, addressing the various social sort of spending areas that we need to invest in. And the edible oil subsector, like I spoke to you about earlier, is very closely linked with agriculture. And when we look at the agricultural sector, that is where majority of our poor actually, that's the space they're operating in. Over 80% of Zambians are operating in the agricultural sector. So you can imagine a scenario where, for instance, we adopt a policy amendment in our next budget speech, for example, where we zero-rate value-added tax on edible oils because they're essential for human health, right? What we do there is create the opportunity for the edible oils industry, local industry, to grow. And by doing that, we are immediately creating an opportunity for the agricultural sector to feed into this agro-processing sector. Right. And I think we do recognize that in the past, agro-processing was one of the fastest growing subsectors in Zambia. And we can get back to that level of operation and even surpass it and be able to achieve our broad aspirations, which is a higher contribution to GDP from manufacturing, but also employment creation for the Zambian people.
All right, so now our neighboring country, Tanzania, has significantly increased production of oilseeds since 2010. How can Zambia create linkages to boost, our oils industry to our advantage?
Okay. So again, on the linkages, it's always a discussion in and around how do we create a conducive business environment? How do we create a pro business or pro industry environment? And that is usually anchored in discussions in and around policy. Now, when we talk about tax policy, especially for the edible oils industry, you know, we need a higher level of consistency. We need a higher level of predictability. And this will allow players who have invested millions of dollars in plant and machinery, millions of dollars in creating jobs for Zambia, to expand their operations, thereby creating more jobs. And again, it always ends up with this linkage to the agricultural sector, because their key inputs, the raw material, is drawn from Zambia. We have to grow the soya beans, we have to grow the cotton seed, and all of that is channeled into the processing aspect. And beyond that point, we always talk about forward and backward linkages in manufacturing, and so that, you know, so we're linked to the agricultural sector, but additionally we are linked to the service sector, because once we create this product, it needs to be distributed, it needs to be sold. All of that is job creation. And what we need to anchor our interventions is in the policy environment, and making sure that we create the space for growth. So again, here, of course, we spoke about our submissions for 2019 and considerations that should be taken, you know, for a 3 to 5 year period. We say 0 rate VAT, or completely exempt the edible oil sector from paying value-added tax. Now, currently the tax is 16%. If we were able to exempt VAT, like other countries have done, South Africa and Kenya as well, which are very strong economies producing edible oils and directly competing with us, if we were able to exempt that 16%, and our investors, or the people who are adding value in edible oils, wouldn't need to claim VAT from government, which is currently a key impediment in terms of holding working capital for industry to reinvest. And that 16% would immediately be channeled back into ensuring that the operations are expanded. Once operations are expanded, we have created employment. We have broadened the tax base in the sense that it's formal employment and it's taxable. So ZRA would benefit, the Ministry of Finance would benefit from collecting more revenue. Additionally, because we have an export orientation in the edible oils industry, if Zambia becomes self-sufficient, we have more than enough capacity. Our challenge has been, like you had said earlier, illegal imports, of course, again, being charged on inputs, making Zambian products uncompetitive. If we're able to address that, Zambia can export our products. We earn forex, and this can be channeled back into the reserves for the country. And all of this speaks to, you know, creating a much more stable macroeconomic environment, Zambia contributing more, manufacturing contributing more to sustainable national development. We must begin to recognize that value addition is at the core of ensuring that Zambia becomes a sustainable economy.
You're watching Nightlive, and tonight we're discussing Zambia's capacity to promote the growth of the edible oils industry. And I'm joined by the Zambia Association of Manufacturers Chief Executive Officer. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Don't go away. This is Nightlive. So now South Africa has established capabilities in crushing, refining, and manufacturing oil-based products. How can we increase trade with South Africa to boost our local oil industries? I know you did touch a little bit on this, but let's just delve more, you know, as compared to South Africa.
Okay, so it's always important to make regional comparisons and to look at regional markets. And when it comes to enhancing our trade with South Africa, I mean, it is anchored in a lot of things. First of all, I already talked about the fact that we need to ensure that we're able to compete. And I'm not talking about the quality of the products here, because for the most part, Zambia has made significant headway in ensuring that we're producing quality products that meet required standards and are compliant with existing regulations. So going towards answering your question about how to penetrate the South African market, I think it is anchored addressing the competitiveness issue, but also in ensuring that we're able to market our Zambian products in a manner that won't allow them to be blocked at the border, you know. I think we've seen in Zambia, we do accept and we're very willing to import South African products because they've been able to brand their products in a way that gives us confidence in them. And, you know, proudly South African is something we talk about.
And you know, sorry to cut short, but just on that, you know, it's been very difficult. For instance, sometimes people will say, okay, you know, something happened to workers, for instance, at one of the chain stores. Let's all boycott South African products. Do you think it's that easy? You know. Because when you walk in these chain stores, most of the products you see, in as much as, you know, the country is trying to, you know, promote the buy Zambian, be Zambian, you know, sometimes the packaging, you know, cannot be very, you know, very attractive to the eye. But anyway, yeah, I was just trying to bring it to that point where you're talking about Zambia is very, you know, it imports a lot of, you know, products from South Africa because of their packaging.
Well, it's not because of their packaging. It's because they've been able to brand their products. And I'm talking specifically about the Proudly South African campaign that they did way back. But they were able to install in our minds this thought that a South African product is superior to a Zambian product. Now, if you walk into chain stores today and you compare the Zambian products that are competing with South African products and even other international products and brands, what you will see is that Zambia has come a long way. We have done a lot of work as industry to ensure that not only are our products quality, but the packaging itself is able to compete not only on a regional level, but on an international level. And now what is left outside of ensuring that we bring our SMEs along in this discussion about exporting to other countries, what's now left is ensuring that that Buy Zambia brand becomes something that is going to identify high quality Zambian products and make it very easy. If I go to Kenya, I should be able to see one logo that identifies a quality Zambian products that is compliant with standards. Unfortunately, that's what we are rolling out as the Association of Manufacturers, issuing that one logo to industry. And to service providers, so that when we walk out, you walk into any shop in Zambia and you see this one mark. I think right now you can agree with me that there's a proliferation of different types of branding in and around Proudly Zambian, and you're never really sure what is the meaning behind that. But finally, we've come to a point where it's one logo, one meaning, one identity. When we're talking about quality assurance and compliance, and really ensuring that our consumers know that this is a quality product and this is a quality service, that's what that logo will do. And South Africa did that very successfully with their Proudly South African campaign.
But apart from doing their campaign, you know, we do know for a fact that South Africa also imports a lot of products from the UK as well as the USA. Does that mean that they cannot prosper with this, you know, Proudly South African slogan, where they just have almost like 99% of products that are proudly South African?
Yeah, we must acknowledge the fact that, well, if you're talking about, if I'm going to talk about...
Where do we get, what I'm trying to get at is, when can Zambia get to that point where we are, you know, we have almost 90% of products in our chain stores or other, you know, outlets, and then we're just importing a little bit from, you know, other countries.
So that is the main mandate and objective of the Association of Manufacturers. When we talk about a modern and efficient manufacturing sector, that's what we're advocating for. When we're talking about developing policies that will promote value addition, that's what we're talking about. Now, in order for South Africa to reach the level where it's at, there has to be adequate policies, and there has to be a conducive environment to bring up all of those manufacturers that are creating those South African brands and creating those South African products. So in Zambia, the same has to happen. We have to ensure that the policies and regulations, the enforcement as well, is one that will promote Zambian brands. Now, we're not saying don't bring the product, but we're saying create the space for Zambian brands to grow.
All right. And then how do you think the policy that South Africa has helped, you know, our own Zambian, manufacturers in putting their products at a certain standard, you know, to be allowed in that country? How do you think that has helped, you know, our local manufacturers?
I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're working in a global environment, and globalization, even regional integration, is calling for our manufacturers to ensure that the products are manufactured to a level that is of a certain standard.
Yes.
So once we attain that level, there should be nothing that should impede us from entering any market, be it South Africa, be it Zimbabwe, Kenya, EU, UK, US. Once we attain the standard, we should be able to market our product and to deliver our product to these key economies. But of course, in doing that, I always bring it back to the policy framework, because if it is expensive to produce a Zambian product, it will become very difficult for us to compete on price in another market. So we have to address the fundamentals at home to ensure that our exports can grow.
All right. And on policy, just on that, how have the policies that you've created as ZAM, helped our local manufacturers?
Okay, so we don't create policies. We only provide input and try and, influence the development of policies that are in support of industry. So, I mean, we talk about a number of different things. And when it's cross-cutting, we're talking about, if it's trade facilitation, we're saying let's ensure that procedures are efficient. Let's ensure that it's easy to set up a business. How long does it take? Let's ensure that our ZRA systems, for instance, are as efficient as possible.
Okay.
Let's make doing business as easy as possible.
Okay, and moving on, as we conclude the program, where do we seem to be lagging behind in this industry, and how can we make good use of our already refined oils, to boost the market for better revenue?
Okay, so in terms of where we're lagging behind, again, it's at the moment, I think everyone can feel that there's need for some sort of shift to promote value addition in terms of our policy environment. We have to create a better environment to do business. So the proposals that we've put forward, talking about exempting the edible oils industry from paying value-added tax, will go a long way in enhancing competitiveness with key economies that are competing with us right now, like South Africa and Kenya, moving towards measures to curb illicit trade into the country. That's another key discussion that we need to have. How do we address illicit trade? How do we address counterfeit goods in a systematic manner? That is, something that we can be held accountable to, both government and private sector, to say we need to jointly come together. We need to enhance consultation. We need to begin to talk a lot more and begin to also implement action to ensure the growth of the sector. And it's edible oils we're talking about today, but broadly speaking, this applies to industry as a whole.
That is CHIPEGO ZULU from the Zambia Association of the Manufacturers, and she is the Chief Executive Officer. And tonight we were discussing Zambia's capacity to promote the growth of the edible oils industry. That's all we had time for. I'm Francesca Phiri-Banda. Have a good night and stay blessed.